Hey guys, tonight we're fumbling around in the pitch-black past. The world of Victorian family life before electricity. That's right, no light switches, no Netflix buffering at 2 a.m, not even a faintly glowing fridge to judge your midnight snacking. Tonight you'll experience a reality scarier than your phone dying at 1%. A world where every night was a blackout, every room was a shadowy guessing game, and your greatest hope for survival was a candle that smelled like sad beef. So before you resign yourself to the coming darkness, take a second to like this video and subscribe, but only if you actually enjoy what I do here. And hey, leave a comment with where you're listening from and how many flashlights you own. There's always someone out there who claims to prefer candlelight, and I want names. Now dim your lights, switch on a fan for that sweet white noise, and get comfortable. Maybe wrap yourself up, because it's about to get colder than a Victorian dad's approval. But let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered, how did people wake up for work when the alarm clock meant the neighbour's rooster screaming through a window? Did anyone ever find their way to the chamber pot without breaking a toe? What did kids do for fun when the only screen time was staring at the wall and hoping it moved? How do you make dinner when your kitchen's as bright as the inside of a sock? And what happens when you drop your only candle in the privy? Do you just give up on life? Congratulations, you've just woken up in 1873. It's raining, you're cold, and the only thing glowing in your bedroom is possibly radioactive wallpaper. Good luck. Your eyelids twitch open to the world's oldest alarm clock. Sunlight leaking through threadbare curtains and the enthusiastic squawking of birds outside your window. Forget snooze buttons. Victorian mornings arrive whenever the universe feels like it. Welcome to daybreak, where you're up before you want to be and everyone's cranky until breakfast. You're lying on a lumpy mattress sandwiched between siblings, your face pressed into a pillow that smells faintly of damp straw and regret. The sun, a natural show-off, shoves its way through the grimy window pane. It's not a gentle, romantic sort of dawn, more like an aggressive searchlight, exposing every speck of dust and every member of your family in various states of undress and disarray. You'd love to roll over and ignore it, but there's no blackout curtain, no magical 5 more minutes. The Victorian era has one universal law. When the sun's up, so are you, and so are the chickens, and the neighbour's rooster. And if you're lucky, not the local factory's 6 a.m. steam whistle, because nothing says good morning like an industrial shriek. The birds outside your window are having a full-throated existential crisis, and the sound bounces off the stone streets, straight through the single pane of glass that's pretending to be a window. If you ever wondered what it's like to be on the wrong end of a barnyard symphony, congratulations, you're living it. You fumble for your slippers in the half-light, only to discover one is already occupied by something alive. It's probably a mouse. You reach for your dressing gown, but your little brother is using it as a blanket. This is fine. You try to move quietly, but the floorboards creak in protest, each one eager to rat you out to the rest of the household. Privacy? Not a thing. The Victorian morning is a group event. Everyone's in it together, whether they want to be or not. Someone groans from across the room, a sound that means please stop breathing so loudly in the universal language of siblings. Your mother, always up before the sun like some kind of supernatural force, is already in the kitchen, banging pots and clanging the kettle, as a gentle reminder that tea is not going to make itself. You're not sure how she does it. Maybe she just never sleeps. If you're a child, you're expected to rise, shine, and immediately start being useful. Beds must be made, as much as you can make a mattress stuffed with hay. Faces washed in ice-cold water fetched from the backyard pump, and hair combed into submission. Ever tried combing hair with a wooden brush by a window so dirty it turns sunlight into gloom? It's like grooming yourself in a funhouse mirror made of fog. You do your best, and so does everyone else. Family portraits from this era are full of children with slicked-down cowlicks and 1,000-yard stares. There's a reason every Victorian looks slightly haunted. By breakfast, you're already tired. Your back hurts. Your eyes sting, and you've managed to stub at least 2 toes and 1 sense of dignity. But there's no time to wallow. Work awaits. For the adults, that might mean a day at the factory, shop or field. For the children, it's chores, sweeping, polishing, and making sure the coal scuttle doesn't mysteriously empty itself. The house itself creaks to life, pipes rattling, kettle whistling, and siblings squabbling over the wash basin. The only thing everyone agrees on is that nobody got enough sleep. If you mention this, your grandmother will regale you with tales of her own childhood, which allegedly involved waking up at 3 a.m. to milk the neighbour's goat, sweep the entire street, and invent the concept of hardship. You listen dutifully, knowing that her story will stretch until the porridge is served. Eventually you make your way downstairs, squinting at the patch of sunlight on the floor. You stand in it, shivering, grateful for the day's one free heating upgrade. The world outside is waking up too. Horse-drawn carts rattle by, vendors shout their wares, and someone 2 doors down is already burning something questionable for breakfast. You take a deep breath, filling your lungs with hope, dust, and the faint promise of tea. Another day has begun, like it or not. Welcome to morning Victorian style, harsh, communal, and utterly unavoidable. The sun's down, your hands are full, and the entire house is one big shadow puppet theatre. You clutch a sputtering candle, trying not to trip over pets, boots, or small children. In Victorian homes, bumping into furniture was a nightly ritual, one that forged character, bruises, and a lifelong grudge against coffee tables. Every step after sunset is a game of memory, luck, and pain tolerance. Your candle is more a suggestion of light than an actual beacon, sending wild shadows lurching across the walls. Even the bravest Victorian can be reduced to a trembling wreck by a well-placed ottoman. No 2 evenings are ever the same, and every trip across the parlour is a choose-your-own-adventure story where most of the endings involve stifled swearing and new shin injuries. Moving through your house feels a bit like exploring the world's saddest haunted maze. The air is thick with the scent of tallow and singed wick. If you breathe too hard, your candle flickers, threatening to plunge you into instant blindness. It's a delicate art. Walk too quickly, and you create a breeze that kills your only light source. Move too slowly, and you risk falling asleep on your feet and waking up with a cat on your face. Candle in hand, you shuffle forward with all the confidence of someone walking across a Lego field in bare feet. Every object in the room is out to get you. Boots multiply at night, spawning new pairs in the path you walked safely just an hour before. Children, who should be asleep, lurk under tables, ready to leap out for a last cup of water, or to share an urgent and terrifyingly detailed account of a dream involving a horse in a bonnet. The family dog, meanwhile, has made it his mission to lie in the absolute darkest patch of hallway, blending into the floorboards like a furry, tripwire-equipped ghost. You're never entirely sure where he is until you've stepped directly on his tail, which is followed by a yelp, a cascade of apologies, and the faint but definite feeling that the dog is plotting revenge. Let's not forget the decor. Victorians loved knickknacks, ornamental vases, decorative stools, inexplicable side tables, and chairs that exist solely to stub toes and baffle guests. Each one is an obstacle waiting for a victim, and by the end of the week, you can navigate them by the location of your bruises. The bruises themselves are like a private living map of where you've been and what you've survived. It isn't just the lower half of your body at risk. Ceilings are low, chandeliers dangle menacingly, and door frames are somehow always a half-inch shorter than you remember. Tall family members have learned to duck preemptively. Guests don't. They become cautionary tales for the next round of visitors. Occasionally the candle gives up altogether. You're left standing in perfect darkness, clutching a hot puddle of wax and wishing you'd paid more attention during how to light a match with one hand while panicking lessons. You debate your options, stand still and wait for rescue, crawl to safety, or call out for someone to bring you another candle, which, in true Victorian fashion, will be met with groans about wasting precious tallow. Sometimes, if you're lucky, you'll catch a glimpse of another family member's candle bobbing down the hall like a distant flickering firefly. You move towards it, lured by the promise of light and companionship, only to realise too late that it's your sister who is in a mood, and she's just as lost as you are. This is the reality of Victorian evenings, each room a landscape of hazards, each journey an exercise in patience and creative language. And yet, after a while, you develop a sixth sense for obstacles. You learn the precise distance between your bed and the washstand. You can spot a stray boot in pitch dark by the way the air feels around your ankles. It's a family skill, passed down from generation to generation, like recipes or stubbornness. And in the morning, as the bruises bloom and the complaints are catalogued, you'll laugh about the great candlelit expedition that was another night at home, or at least you'll laugh after your toes stop throbbing. There's no gentle way to put this. When nature calls at 3 a.m, your options are a cold trek outside or a porcelain pot lurking under the bed. Miss the target and you're in for a cleaning job that would break modern spirits. Bodily functions, now with added horror, inconvenience and family witnesses. The chamber pot, a marvel of Victorian engineering really, a bowl with a handle and an existential crisis. If you're lucky, it's actual porcelain. If you're not, it's a battered tin that clangs like a church bell every time someone bumps it. The chamber pot is not a status symbol. It's a necessity, a humble but essential fixture of every family bedroom, its presence both comforting and deeply ominous. It sits quietly in the gloom, a silent promise that no one is above nature's call. Let's set the scene. It's deep night. The house is colder than the inside of a meat locker, and your only source of heat is the faint warmth left behind by your family's collective body heat and the vague memory of a coal fire now long dead. You wake, instantly aware that ignoring your bladder is no longer an option. The outside privy is somewhere beyond the reach of your bravery. The icy wind alone could kill you. That leaves the chamber pot. You fish for it blindly beneath the bed, praying no one else got there first, and that the cat hasn't mistaken it for a new water bowl. Using the chamber pot is a study in humility and logistics. For starters, you have to get out of bed without waking everyone else in your sleep pile. No easy task when you're wedged between a snoring uncle and a child who kicks like a mule. You ease your way to the edge, trying not to step on anyone or anything, and attempt to retrieve the pot without sounding like you're launching a naval attack. Every move is amplified in the midnight silence. The tiniest clink is guaranteed to be the loudest thing anyone has ever heard. The floorboards are traitors, squeaking with the glee of a child tattling on their sibling. There's no privacy here. Your night noises are everyone's business, and every awkward splash is a topic of conversation at breakfast. And then, the main event, aim. The chamber pot is not a generous target. The margin for error is slim, and any mistake has immediate disastrous consequences. Too far and you're mopping up a tragedy before dawn. Too close and, well, let's just say you'll wish for a fresh change of everything. The pressure is real. In winter, there's the extra thrill of cold porcelain on bare skin. It's a bracing, soul-awakening sensation, better than coffee, if coffee made you question your life choices every time you drank it. Once business is done, you're faced with a return journey, sliding the pot carefully back under the bed and crawling back into the warm cocoon of your family's collective misery. Sometimes you get lucky and no one stirs. Other times, a sibling mutters, "Wash your hands," which is just their way of saying, "I know what you did, and I'm judging you from my pillow fort, and let's talk about the aftermath." In the morning, someone, usually the youngest or whoever lost the family lottery, is tasked with emptying the contents into the privy or tossing them out into the street. bonus points if your house faces a busy thoroughfare. This ritual is equal parts chore and social hazard. Heaven help you if you trip on the stairs or forget to close the lid. And don't even think about the smell, which lingers as a friendly reminder of last night's festivities. Victorian etiquette had many unwritten rules, but chamber pot protocol was practically an art. Knock before you reach, never use the pot out of turn, and if you must go twice, at least have the decency to apologise. And always pray that the pot is empty before you start. Modern plumbing has spoiled us. Indoor bathrooms are miracles we don't appreciate until the pipes freeze or the lights go out. The Victorians didn't have such luxuries. Their nightly dance with the chamber pot was a humbling reminder that progress is measured not in years, but in flushes. So next time you wake up in the middle of the night, grateful for a heated floor and a softly glowing bathroom, just remember, your ancestors faced the darkness with nothing but courage, a wobbly pot, and the faint hope that no one would remember their aim. Starting the day meant starting the fire, often with hands still half asleep and matches more stubborn than your in-laws. If you've ever fumbled with a lighter in the wind, imagine doing it with damp kindling and Victorian expectations. Congratulations, you're about to inhale more smoke than oxygen. There's nothing romantic about the dawn ritual of fire lighting in a Victorian home. Forget the charming image of a roaring hearth and a pot of tea bubbling merrily away. This is more of an Olympic event, one that requires speed, cunning, and a deep, reckless optimism that today, just maybe, the fire will light before you lose all feeling in your fingers, and the stakes are high. The entire household is depending on you for warmth, breakfast, and the faint hope that nobody will die of hypothermia before noon. First, there's the kindling, which is rarely dry and never where you left it. You root around in the scuttle, producing twigs of questionable integrity, scraps of last week's newspaper, and at least one spider who is deeply offended by your intrusion. Your hands are numb, your breath visible in the morning air, and your audience is growing. The youngest children hover, shivering and impatient, while adults peer over your shoulder, offering helpful advice like, "Try not to burn down the house this time." Next come the matches. These are less instant flame and more mysterious objects that sometimes explode, sometimes fizzle, and always break at the worst possible moment. Victorian matches are a marvel of industrial age unpredictability. You strike one and pray it will produce a flame instead of a disappointing wisp of smoke, or worse, nothing at all. Some mornings, you go through half a box just to get a spark. Other mornings, you consider petitioning the Queen for a medal in futility. Let's talk about the technique. There's a special choreography to firelighting: strike, shield, hope, and repeat. You arrange your kindling just so, stacking it in a way that looks promising until it collapses. You strike a match, cupping your hand around the fragile flame as if you're protecting a baby bird. The match flares, your hopes soar, and then it's out, leaving you with scorched fingertips and a fresh sense of despair. You try again, eyes watering, lungs filling with the fragrant aroma of burning disappointment. Eventually the kindling catches, and for one glorious moment you feel like a wizard. But your triumph is short-lived. The fire coughs, smokes, and threatens to go out at any moment. There is a fine line between nurturing the embers and accidentally producing so much smoke that the fire becomes secondary to the urgent need to open every window. Family members begin to wander in, rubbing their eyes, making pointed comments about your technique, and speculating about whether breakfast will be more burnt than usual. Meanwhile, the rest of the house remains stubbornly frigid. Victorian homes are not known for their insulation. The fire might be roaring in the kitchen, but the upstairs bedrooms still qualify as Arctic research stations. Children rush to the hearth, clutching hands over the meagre flames, while the family dog stretches out in the warmest spot like a smug, furry lord of the manor. Let's not forget the ever-present danger. Burning down the house is a very real possibility. Chimneys are not so much ventilation as they are aspirational. Creosote build-up means every fire is a gamble, and a stray spark can set the whole place ablaze. The family develops a sixth sense for the smell of smouldering wood. If you ever wanted to bond as a unit, nothing brings people together quite like the shared panic of trying to extinguish a fire with whatever's at hand, including, on at least one memorable occasion, yesterday's porridge. Eventually the flames settle, the kettle sings, the house fills with the hopeful aroma of weak tea and stronger smoke. Your job is done until tomorrow morning, when it all begins again. Because in the Victorian era, lighting the fire isn't just about survival, it's a family tradition, a team-building exercise, and a daily reminder that sometimes the only thing standing between you and disaster is a stubborn match and a refusal to give up. Victorian kitchens were dark, smoky, and full of culinary optimism. Breakfast might be porridge, might be bread, but it's definitely flavoured with the scent of last night's fire and the underlying fear of what's lurking in the shadows. Bon appétit, just don't ask what's in the mush. The day begins with the kitchen, if you can call it that, resembling a crime scene where the only thing stolen is your sense of hope. The single window, when not frosted over or blocked by a pile of firewood and last year's onions, offers little in the way of illumination. Instead, light trickles in like it's been mugged on the way. Every surface is painted with a fresh layer of soot. The air tastes like burnt dreams and last night's cabbage. You shuffle in, feet finding every splintered floorboard, eyes watering from the first blast of smoke as the fire tries and fails to behave. Breakfast is less of a meal and more of an ongoing negotiation with the laws of physics, luck, and your family's collective appetite for something warm, please. The menu is reliably unpredictable but always cheap. Porridge, bread, perhaps a knob of leftover cheese, or, on a really wild day, a boiled egg that survived the night without rolling under the stove. If it's porridge, brace yourself. The consistency will range from could patch a boat to surprisingly drinkable. It's ladled out with a wooden spoon older than half the children at the table. Sometimes it's sweetened with molasses or, more commonly, disappointment. Someone will inevitably complain it's too thick, while another complains it's too thin, and your mother, Victorian breakfast general and benevolent dictator, will remind everyone that in her day they just licked the spoon and thanked their stars. Bread, if you have it, is an adventure in itself. Stale? Of course. Toasted? Only if you like your breakfast with a side of charcoal. Victorian toasting is a high-stakes activity involving a long metal fork, an open fire, and enough vigilance to prevent your bread from transforming into something the family dog won't even sniff. The best you can hope for is crunchy on the outside, chewy in the middle, slightly smoky everywhere else. Butter is a rare treat, meted out with military precision. Margarine hasn't been invented yet, so you're stuck with either lard or wishful thinking. Then there's the mush. Nobody knows what's in the mush. It started as yesterday's dinner and took a turn somewhere around midnight. Now, under the watchful glare of the family candle, it resembles something between soup and a dare. Children prod it with spoons, adults look away, and someone inevitably mutters, "It's good for you," in the kind of tone that means we have no other options. The beverage selection is equally inspiring. Tea, if you're fortunate, is brewed strong enough to stand a spoon in. The colour ranges from pale brown to the kind of black usually reserved for morning attire. Coffee, if you've somehow managed to acquire it, tastes faintly of chicory, regret, and ash. Water is always boiled, not for flavour, but because nobody trusts the pipes, the well, or the bucket someone filled from the pond last week. Milk, delivered by a neighbour with a suspiciously cheerful cow, arrives either tepid or already starting to become cheese, and always the sense that something is moving just out of sight. Victorian kitchens are alive, with mice, with drafts, with cousins who arrive unannounced and help themselves to the bread. Every now and then, a daring family member will attempt to rescue a bit of toast that's fallen into the embers. It's a dangerous game, involving a poker, a prayer, and at least one scorched sleeve. Breakfast is eaten quickly, with hunched shoulders and side-eye glances at the window to check if the sun has decided to finally show up. You eat for warmth, not pleasure. The conversation is quiet except for the occasional clatter of spoons and the universal complaint. It's cold in here, and yet for all its gloom and grit, breakfast is an anchor. It's the time when the family gathers, fortifies themselves, and prepares to face another day of soot, chores and adventure. The food might be questionable, but the ritual is not. Here, in the grey half-light and the haze of smoke, you are, however briefly, together. And if you manage to finish your mush without biting into a surprise, well, that's just Victorian luxury. With light at a premium, mornings are a game of tactile roulette. You reach into piles of scratchy wool, hoping to find something that's both clothing and yours. Occasionally you put on your spouse's socks or a child's mitten. Nobody notices. Everyone's half-dressed anyway. In the Victorian home, sunrise is less a visual event and more a gentle suggestion. The house glows with the faintest trace of daylight, barely enough to separate shadows from solid objects. And yet the family must get dressed, quickly, quietly, and mostly by braille. There's no convenient light switch, there's barely a candle. Most mornings, the only illumination is the vague grey haze that seeps through the window, only slightly filtered by last year's soot and whatever passed for curtains. You begin your morning adventure with a hunt for your clothes. No neat chest of drawers here. Instead, garments are heaped in a communal pile on the nearest available surface. A trunk, a chair, a suspiciously lumpy corner of the floor. There's an entire ecosystem at work in the laundry mound. Hats, mittens, stockings, the family cat, hopefully sleeping, but possibly plotting, and at least one sock that appears to have lived another life as a cleaning rag. You plunge your hand into the heap, hoping to come away with something both wearable and appropriate for the weather. The first thing you grab is rough, damp, and unexpectedly heavy. Is it a shirt, a towel, or the neighbour's lost dog? You give it a cautious sniff and decide it's probably not food, which is close enough. In the next handful, a woolen stocking with a hole at the heel and what feels suspiciously like a dried bean stuck inside. Close enough. You're in business. Victorian clothing is not built for comfort or speed. Everything is layered, sometimes for warmth, sometimes because it's been weeks since anyone braved the laundry. You start with a shirt or blouse lumpy with mysterious mending, then add a petticoat, a second shirt, because why not, trousers, or a skirt if you're lucky enough to find one that fits. Buttons are missing, seams are fraying, and every item carries the faint scent of wood smoke, lye, and whatever adventure befell it last week. There's no privacy. Dressing is communal. Siblings swap boots like seasoned horse traders. The smallest child is inevitably wearing a cap that belongs to the eldest. Someone finds themselves halfway into a sleeve before realizing it's the arm of a pair of long johns, not a jacket. At least once a week you spot a brother shuffling around in a skirt and looking confused but resigned. These things happen. No one is awake enough to care. Occasionally a boot goes missing. The search party is formed. The children crawl under beds. Grown-ups peer into wash baskets. And the dog is interrogated for evidence. The culprit is almost always the cat, who takes perverse delight in curling up inside shoes, then watching the chaos unfold. You fish the boot out, shake out a handful of dust, and check for mice before sliding it on. Sometimes it's not your boot, but as long as it's a pair, you count it as a win. If you're lucky enough to find matching socks, you immediately draw suspicion from the rest of the family, who assume you've either cheated or bribed someone. Most socks are odd, patched, or held up with string. Gloves are a luxury, and scarves are distributed according to a mysterious family hierarchy that changes daily. If your scarf smells vaguely of onions, you consider yourself fortunate. It could be worse. No one truly knows whose is whose, and after a while it doesn't matter. Everyone is just grateful to be clothed, even if it's in half the neighbour's wardrobe. There is a gentle solidarity in shared discomfort. Nobody laughs at mismatched mittens or a shirt put on inside out. The real victory is simply being dressed, upright, and vaguely presentable for whatever the Victorian day has planned. So, as you finish buttoning someone else's shirt and tug your feet into boots of uncertain ownership, you give thanks for the darkness. It hides the worst of the stains, after all. You might leave the house with 2 left gloves and a scarf that could double as a curtain, but you survived dressing by touch. In a world without electricity, that's more than enough style for one day. Bath night in a Victorian home is less a hygiene ritual and more an endurance contest. Heating water takes hours, and by the time you pour it in the tin tub, it's the temperature of regret. Soap is optional. Privacy is mythical. Dignity is extinct. If you ever feel the need to build character, simply take a Victorian bath. This is not the modern spa-like soak you might imagine, with scented bubbles and steam curling through the air. No, this is a logistical operation that starts in the kitchen and ends somewhere between frostbite and spiritual enlightenment. The first challenge is assembling the bath itself. A battered tin tub, usually dragged out from beneath the kitchen table or fetched from the yard. It's not built for comfort. It's built for survival, possibly doubled as a laundry basin, and definitely harbours memories of every previous user. Water comes next. There's no plumbing, no helpful pipes delivering a reliable stream of anything. Instead, someone, usually the smallest, coldest, or most guilt-ridden member of the family, is dispatched to the backyard pump with a bucket. The pump handle squeaks, the bucket sloshes, and the water itself is an early morning insult, fresh from the ground and carrying the kind of chill that could stop your heart. In winter, it's not so much water as a personal threat. Heating the water is an act of hope over experience. It goes in pans on the stove, kettle by kettle, each one a tiny promise that this time it will be different. But the stove is busy, porridge is cooking, boots are drying, and someone's trying to iron a shirt with a slab of hot coal. The bath water takes its place in the queue, moving slowly up the ranks as you add more coal to stretch what little hot water you have. By the time the last bucket is dumped in, the steam has died, your optimism has faded, and what's left is just above freezing if you're lucky. Now comes the main event, actual bathing. The first bather, usually the smallest child or the person whose birthday it is, gets the closest thing to warm water. Everyone after that, while the water's reputation as shared grows stronger by the minute. You slip in, bracing yourself for the Arctic embrace, and experience the kind of full-body shiver that would make a polar explorer proud. Goosebumps become your new skin. Breathing is optional. Soap is present. Sometimes, if you have it, it's a homemade brick of lye and animal fat that could double as a blunt weapon. It smells like determination and regret. Lathering up is a process. Rinsing off is more of a suggestion. Scrubbing is hasty after all. You're still negotiating with your will to live. Hair washing is a special horror, with icy water poured over your head from a jug held by a sibling who claims it builds character. You're not convinced, but you are clean, or at least less dirty than before. Privacy? Only a rumour. The bathroom is the kitchen is the living room, and every door in the house has a mysterious habit of refusing to latch. You make peace with the parade of family members passing through. Mother stirs the soup, father sharpens the razor. The dog investigates for scraps, and a sibling makes faces behind the curtain, if you're fancy enough to have one. Modesty is for the wealthy. For everyone else, there's a quick towel and a faster exit. When you're done, you stand shivering on the flagstone floor, wrapped in a threadbare towel that never completely dries between uses. If you're unlucky, your turn came last, and you emerge from the tub smelling less like soap and more like vague family stew. No one cares. The process repeats for every member of the household in water that by the end has seen too much. And yet, after all the suffering, there's a strange sense of triumph. You survived Victorian bath night, cleaner than before, bonded by misery, and ready to wear 3 layers of scratchy wool as armour against the cold. Dignity may be extinct, but so, at least for a day, is most of the grime. And that, in the Victorian era, is victory. When darkness falls, so does conversation, right into the awkward silence of an unlit living room. You sit together in flickering candlelight, knitting, reading, or playing games that end the second someone loses the dice in the carpet. Family bonding, with a side of existential dread. As the sun retreats behind the roofs and the world goes quiet, your house becomes an island of faintly moving shadows and whispering voices. There's no hum of electronics, no background TV noise, just the low crackle of the hearth, the tick of a wind-up clock, and the ever-present possibility that someone will knock over the only source of light. If the day is a blur of clanging chores and shouted reminders, evening is the exact opposite. Everything slows to a crawl, then a halt, then a gentle simmer of boredom. You and your family gather in the parlour, huddled around a single candle like moths with outstanding debts. The candle's wax drips in slow motion, casting ominous shadows across everyone's faces and giving Uncle Edwin the look of a man plotting to recite poetry. The only rule is to keep as still as possible, otherwise the room erupts into chaos. Every little movement threatens to tip over the chessboard or scatter a deck of cards already missing the Queen of Spades. This is peak Victorian entertainment. The youngest child knits, or attempts to, producing what may one day become a scarf or possibly a question mark. Mother embroiders a sampler with grim motivational phrases, virtue through suffering, or don't drop the candle. Father reads the newspaper aloud, squinting at print so small it might as well be a secret code. The article is about someone winning a prize pig 3 towns over, and for the next 30 minutes you all care deeply about that pig. Conversation comes and goes in odd waves. Sometimes it's a long rambling debate about whether it's going to rain tomorrow. Sometimes it's just the polite cough of someone who wishes it were bedtime already. There's a certain type of Victorian silence, thick, meaningful, and laced with the barely contained urge to admit everyone is bored out of their minds. If you're lucky, there's a game of draughts or dominoes to distract from the oppressive quiet. The rules are loosely enforced, and play is frequently interrupted by the discovery of yet another missing piece, often found weeks later inside a boot or in the family cat's personal hoard. Some evenings a brave soul reads a story out loud, their voice wavering as the room grows colder, and their audience drifts in and out of consciousness. If the tale is scary, children cling to each other and try not to look at the window, convinced that every branch scraping the glass is a spectre come to complain about your last chess move. Sometimes, just for the thrill of it, you play I Spy. It's a short game, given the visual options. I spy with my little eye something beginning with S. The answer is always shadow, or soot, or on a really exciting night, sleep. As the candle burns lower, eyelids droop. The conversation fades to murmurs, then sighs, then the gentle shuffle of someone deciding to turn in early, only to trip over the family dog and cause a minor uproar. There's a brief argument about who left the door open, who moved the candlestick, and who is hogging the only warm spot near the fire. Eventually peace returns, not because anyone is satisfied, but because everyone is exhausted. These evenings aren't just about entertainment, they're about survival, togetherness, and the comforting ritual of simply being in the same room, sharing silence as the darkness closes in. It's family bonding, Victorian style, staring at each other half asleep, waiting for tomorrow to bring another round of the same. You're not just passing time, you're building stories, forging memories, and practicing the fine art of enduring tedium. And if all else fails, you can always blame the existential dread on the candlelight. If you thought modern homework was hard, try deciphering tiny handwriting by the light of a lamp that leaks more soot than illumination. Victorians invented squinting as a lifestyle and turned nearsightedness into a generational trait. Your school day is finally over, and you're home, where the scent of boiled cabbage still lingers and the kitchen table is sticky with the residue of breakfast past. But there's no time to rest. There are lessons to copy, sums to complete, and not nearly enough daylight to do it in. By the time you've finished chores and choked down dinner, the only thing standing between you and academic disaster is a battered oil lamp and your own faltering eyesight. Homework in the Victorian era is not for the faint of heart or weak of cornea. You take your place at the table, elbows bumping siblings who are also sentenced to another evening of arithmetic agony. The lamp flickers and spits, its wick in a perpetual battle with gravity and common sense. Its glow is uneven, pooling directly beneath it in a golden puddle, while the rest of the room dissolves into gloom. You learn quickly that good lighting is not in the Victorian vocabulary. You squint at your notebook, the paper already mottled and the lines blurred by smudges, old ink and the ghostly thumbprints of generations past. Ink is precious and sticky, dispensed from a bottle that always tips the moment you forget to cap it. You dip your nib, praying not to blot your work and set about the task at hand, copying neat lines of geography facts, Latin conjugations, and lists of exports from places you'll never visit. Arithmetic is a test of patience, vision, and upper arm endurance. Sums are written in pencil so faint you have to tilt the page to catch the light just right, and heaven help you if the lamp guttered at any point, you'll be erasing by feel alone. Your handwriting, once the pride of your third-grade teacher, now looks like you've been attacked by a caffeinated spider. Each letter is a gamble, each number an artistic statement on the futility of education after sunset. Every few minutes the lamp flares up, threatening to set your sleeve on fire, or else chokes on its own wick and fills the air with a plume of black smoke. There's a fine layer of soot collecting on your books, your hands, and inevitably your lungs. You cough politely, as is the custom, and try to breathe through your sleeve. Someone will need to clean the chimney tomorrow, but not you. If you survive long enough to finish your homework, you've earned a night off from domestic servitude. Meanwhile, your siblings are locked in similar battles. One attempts to memorize a poem, repeating the words in a low, droning chant. Another stares at a map, lips moving as they try to remember the difference between the Nile and the Thames. The youngest, sentenced to copy the alphabet, has fallen asleep on the letter Q. There is no mercy here. Every mistake is an opportunity for parental involvement. Father, magnifying glass in hand, corrects your spelling with the same gravitas he uses to discuss international news. Mother offers encouragement from the sidelines, mostly in the form of hurry up or you'll miss your supper. If you're lucky, someone will offer to read aloud, providing a soundtrack of moral tales or cautionary stories about the dangers of illiteracy, which, judging by the current lighting, seems like a viable alternative. Eventually your eyes sting and your head aches, but the work is done. You blow out the lamp with a sigh, your vision swimming with after-images of ink and flickering flame. If you manage to avoid knocking over the ink, setting your sleeve alight, or mistaking your Latin homework for your sums, you count it as a victory. Victorian homework is about more than learning. It's about surviving the darkness, the smoke, and the ever-present threat of going blind before you reach adulthood. If you manage to hand in your work without a scorch mark, your teacher will call it neat, and you'll know you earned every smudge and squint. With no television, Every family gathering inevitably devolves into terrifying the youngest child, with tales of haunted woods and vengeful spirits. Every flicker of shadow is now a potential ghost, and bedtime will be a group activity for safety. Night in a Victorian home is an invitation to let the imagination run wild, and then immediately regret it. As the candle gutters and the wind hums at the window panes, the parlour transforms from a place of mild boredom into a theatre of fear. It starts innocently enough. A story to pass the time, a whispered rumour from school, maybe a cousin recalling a strange sighting in the garden. But the minute someone utters the word ghost, all bets are off. Entertainment has become an arms race of horror, and nobody is safe. You huddle closer to the fire, knees drawn up, eyes wide. The family storyteller, usually the eldest or the uncle with the bushiest sideburns, begins his tale in a low, ominous voice. Every sentence is dragged out for maximum suspense. It was a night much like this, he says, gesturing meaningfully at the candle, which picks that exact moment to flicker. The story might involve a headless horseman, a white lady roaming the moors, or a mysterious hand knocking from beneath the floorboards. No matter the subject, it always ends with a warning about venturing outside after dark or disrespecting your elders, just to keep things educational. Shadows become characters in the story. The curtain sways, surely the hand of a restless spirit. The family cat leaps onto a chair and everyone jumps, convinced for a split second it's the ghost of Great-Aunt Mildred come back to demand her teacup. Even the harmless creak of wood becomes an echo from another world. The air itself seems to thicken with possibility and dread. Children, predictably, are torn between fascination and terror. The bravest pretend to scoff, but their feet creep up onto the chair as the story grows more absurd. The youngest quietly negotiates with the family dog for protection, offering scraps of bread in exchange for sitting very, very close. You'd like to act nonchalant, but your eyes are glued to the one dark patch of the ceiling that seems to move every time someone mentions the woman in black. Adults play along too. Mothers cross themselves. Fathers pretend to check the locks on doors and windows. Grandmother offers extra prayers just in case. And someone always remembers a true story about a cousin's neighbour's friend who saw a ghost right on this very street. Before long, even the dog looks nervous. Bedtime is now an ordeal. Nobody wants to be the last one up the stairs or the first to turn out the light. Teeth are brushed at record speed. Shoes are double-checked for hidden skeletons. There's much debate about who has to sleep closest to the door, just in case a wandering spirit drops by for a midnight visit. Older siblings capitalize on this, inventing elaborate rituals for protection. A pillow fort, a sock placed under the pillow, a chant repeated 3 times while standing on one leg. Eventually everyone piles into bed together, the usual rules about personal space abandoned in the name of survival. Blankets are hoarded, knees jab backs, and someone inevitably whispers, "Did you hear that?" right before sleep finally takes over. Any unexpected sound, a tree branch scratching the glass, a mouse in the wall, the groan of the house settling, brings everyone instantly awake, hearts pounding. But with so many bodies crammed together, the fear is manageable. No ghost could possibly fit in this bed anyway. By morning, the terror has faded. The ghost stories become just stories again, and the only spirits left are the yawning children stumbling through breakfast. But the memories linger, tucked into the corners of the parlour and carried down through the years. Proof that even in the absence of electricity, Victorian families could always find a way to keep the night interesting and make sure nobody ever wanted to use the chamber pot alone. No insulation, single-pane windows and doors that close most of the way. The Victorian home was a wind tunnel with ambition. Every room has its own microclimate, and every attempt to keep warm is a group project in futility. You'd think 4 walls and a roof would be enough to keep out the elements, but Victorian architecture has other ideas. The minute October arrives, your house transforms into a climate experiment gone wrong. The sitting room is Siberia. The kitchen is the Sahara, except when it's the North Sea. And your bedroom toggles between walk-in refrigerator and tropical rainforest, depending on which way the wind is blowing and whether the dog has claimed the only warm patch of floor. You dress for the indoors the way mountaineers dress for Everest. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of socks, something woolen that used to be a scarf, and a shawl knitted by a relative with a grudge. Blankets are moved from bed to chair to lap in a daily migration pattern that rivals the great wildebeest herds. If you're lucky, you've got a hot brick wrapped in flannel, serving as both heating device and occasional bludgeon when a sibling tries to steal it. And still, the draft finds you. It's patient, creative, and absolutely merciless. It squeezes through cracks in the wall, seeps under doors, and howls down the chimney like a banshee with boundary issues. The best you can do is fight back. You jam rags into window frames, hang heavy curtains that might as well be tissue paper, and nail down every rug you own, but the cold air always wins. On particularly windy nights, you can see your breath in the hallway, and sometimes in the pantry, which is great for preserving the cheese, but less great for your toes. There's no such thing as climate control. There's barely such a thing as control. You learn to read the weather by the household's behaviour. If everyone is huddled in the kitchen, you know the rest of the house is officially uninhabitable. If the dog refuses to leave the hearth, you cancel any plans that involve walking more than 10 feet from the fire. Mother keeps a close eye on the curtains. When they move, she mutters oaths about the builder and starts another round of stuffing gaps with whatever's at hand. Old newspapers, scraps of fabric, a child who isn't moving fast enough. Sleep is a challenge. The night air snakes under the bedroom door and up through the floorboards, transforming your mattress into a chilly slab of regret. You cocoon yourself in every available blanket and tuck the covers under your feet like you're bracing for a siege. If you're not careful, you'll wake up with the unpleasant realization that your pillow has frozen to the wall. It's character building, they say. You suspect it's actually just cold. Attempts at warmth bring their own perils. The fire in the sitting room is moody at best, and if you huddle too close, you risk setting your nightshirt alight or singeing the family cat. Too far, and you may as well be outdoors. Occasionally someone proposes all family members sleep in the same room for warmth, which sounds cosy but quickly devolves into a snoring contest, a blanket war, and an impromptu retelling of ghost stories. See segment 10. There is a brief window each day between lighting the first fire and the last embers dying, when the temperature climbs from dire to slightly less dire. This is when chores are done, tea is made, and optimism peaks. It doesn't last. As soon as the sun sets, the house resumes its true purpose, testing your will to live and your tolerance for cold drafts, and yet somehow you persist. You shuffle from room to room, chasing warmth, inventing new ways to stuff cracks, and telling yourself spring is just around the corner. The relentless draft never gives up, but neither do you. In this eternal battle, victory is measured in degrees. If you can get the temperature above freezing, you're basically winning. And if not, well, at least you have a new reason to complain over breakfast. Washing clothes means hauling buckets, boiling water, scrubbing with soap the consistency of gravel, and wringing things out until your arms ache. It's CrossFit, but with less enthusiasm and more mildew. Laundry day in a Victorian household isn't so much an event as it is an ordeal, one that takes all day, several gallons of water, the collective upper body strength of the family, and a small but fervent prayer for dry weather. There's no quick cycle, no spin setting, no friendly beep to let you know your socks are ready. There is only labour, and more labour, and the growing suspicion that your shirt is plotting against you. It starts before sunrise, as all good Victorian sufferings do. First, there's the matter of water. You haul it, bucket by bucket, from the nearest pump or well, arms wobbling, shoulders burning. The lucky families have a water pump indoors, but most just have a sturdy pair of boots and the hope that the ground hasn't frozen solid. The buckets are heavy, the handles dig into your hands, and by the time you've got enough to fill a copper tub, you've already broken a sweat and your day has barely begun. Now comes the boiling, because nothing says clean like scalding steam and the possibility of third-degree burns. You set kettles on the stove, feeding the fire like a dragon, coaxing out enough hot water to make the clothes at least pretend to be sanitized. Everything that can hold heat is pressed into service. The stew pot, the kettle, the random tin cup that's missing a handle. The kitchen becomes a sauna, except with less relaxation and more yelling about where all the clean towels have gone. Next is the soap. Victorian laundry soap is not the sweet-smelling, pastel-hued bar you might recognise from modern commercials. No, this is a homemade brick of lye and animal fat that's so gritty it could double as sandpaper in a pinch. It's stored on a high shelf, for safety, because children and curious pets must be protected from its mysterious power. And when you use it, your hands come away red and tingling. Some claim it builds character. Most just accept it. Builds calluses. Clothes are scrubbed on a ribbed washboard until your knuckles are raw, and your patience is thinner than the family nightshirt. Every stain is a personal affront. Grass, soot, ink, and whatever mysterious substance your younger sibling decided to roll in this week. You dunk, scrub, slap, and rinse. Repeat. Then repeat again, just to be sure. If your arms don't ache and your back isn't screaming, you're probably doing it wrong, or you're just stuck on handkerchiefs. Wringing out the laundry is an event in itself. You twist shirts, socks, and sheets with the single-minded determination of a Victorian matron facing down a door-to-door salesman. Water pours onto the flagstones, and your arms develop muscles you didn't know existed. The best-case scenario is that your clothes are only damp when you finish. The worst case is that you wrung so hard, you snapped a button, tore a seam, or flung a sock out the window and into the neighbour's cabbage patch. And now, finally, it's time to dry. Drying racks, clotheslines, the backs of chairs, and any patch of sunlight not already claimed by the family cat become battlegrounds. If the weather cooperates, clothes dry crisp and fresh in the open air, picking up the faint scent of smoke in the neighbour's stew. If it's raining, you're out of luck. The laundry stays indoors, dripping onto the floor and giving every room that cosy, mildewy ambience the Victorians are famous for. When all is said and done, the family gathers to fold the laundry, which is just another excuse for everyone to argue over who owns the least ragged underthings. You might not have perfectly white linens or shirts free of mysterious stains, but you have survived Victorian Laundry Day. And really, that's all anyone could ask for: soap, muscle, prayer, and the faint hope you don't have to do it again until next week. With the sun gone and lamps dim, cooking is a bold experiment. Did you just season the stew or spill lamp oil in it? Is that roast or a shoe? It's anyone's guess, and dinner guests had better not be picky. Dinner in the Victorian home is part ritual, part gamble, and all about expectation management. As daylight fades, the kitchen is transformed from a smoky hub of possibility to a culinary guessing game, lit by nothing but a fickle oil lamp and hope. Every shadow seems to hide a hazard, a forgotten turnip, a lurking mouse, or the family cat scheming for scraps. The best chefs of the era possess a sixth sense for finding food in the gloom, and the best eaters possess a strong jaw and an even stronger stomach. The menu is theoretically planned in the morning, but by evening, the reality is shaped by what survived the larder, what the butcher actually had, and what hasn't been devoured by mice. Meat is a rare and expensive treat, usually reserved for Sundays or surprise visits from wealthy relatives. More likely, dinner means a stew, root vegetables, old onions, the last of last week's bread, all simmered together until everything tastes of salt and optimism. Potatoes are a staple, but so is the creeping suspicion that at least one ingredient was never meant for human consumption. Preparation is an exercise in multitasking, stirring the pot, shielding your eyes from the worst of the smoke, and keeping children and pets from adding surprise ingredients. The fire needs constant stoking. Too little, and the soup sulks along in a lukewarm puddle. Too much, and you end up with a blackened crust that doubles as a kitchen air freshener. Pots rattle, pans hiss, and someone inevitably drops a spoon into the depths, only to find it 3 days later during breakfast. Seasoning is less an art and more a process of elimination. Spices are precious and hoarded, but a heavy hand with salt is seen as both prudent and patriotic. You try to remember, did you just add pepper, or was that a shake of coal dust from the mantel? If you're feeling adventurous, you toss in a mysterious dried herb from a jar with a faded label that may or may not say time. By the time everything is ready, you can't be sure whether it's done or just surrendering. Food is served directly from the pot, often with a ladle that has seen better centuries. The roast, if there is one, emerges from the oven looking determined, if slightly confused about its identity. Was it pork, or beef, or the neighbour's lost boot? Only the dog knows for sure, and even he looks hesitant. Dinner is eaten by candlelight, which conveniently obscures most of the meal's more distressing features. If the bread is burnt, you scrape off the worst of it and call it extra crispy. If the soup is thin, you praise it as delicate. Every bite is accompanied by the soundtrack of hopeful chewing, exaggerated compliments, what a unique flavour, and the clatter of cutlery as everyone avoids the mysterious bit at the bottom of the bowl. Conversation turns to the usual, what the neighbours are burning for dinner, who dropped the carrot in the fire, and whether tonight's stew tastes better or worse than last Tuesday's. Children, ever honest, might ask pointed questions like, was this supposed to be crunchy? Or, is this the same stew from last week just with a new hat? As the plates are cleared and the last of the gravy is sopped up with bread, you can't help but feel a certain pride. You survived another Victorian dinner. The food may be mysterious, but so is life. If no one chokes and the cat is fed, it's considered a roaring success. Because in a world without electricity, every meal is a leap of faith, and every dinner, for better or worse, a new family legend. Central heating is a fantasy. Real Victorians share beds, siblings, parents, sometimes the odd visitor. If you want a pillow, claim it fast. If you want blankets, invent a time machine. Forget any modern ideas about personal space or queen-size mattresses. In the Victorian household, the bed is less a private sanctuary and more a communal holding pen, one where warmth is shared, alliances are tested, and nightly grievances are aired in silence. The average family's sleeping arrangements would look, to modern eyes, like an overcrowded sleepover gone slightly wrong. It starts with the claim. The first one in gets the warmest spot, usually in the middle, flanked by bodies on all sides, nature's insulation, but with more elbows. The unlucky ones end up on the edge, pressed against the icy wall, clutching at scraps of blanket and dignity. Blankets are in short supply, pillows even more so. They're distributed according to a family logic that changes nightly, sometimes based on age, sometimes based on who lost at parlour games, and sometimes based on who can grab the fastest. If you don't move quickly, your pillow will be a rolled-up coat, and your blanket is last year's curtain. You'd think there'd be order, but no. Each night, it's a tangle of arms and legs, toes seeking warmth, knees poking ribs, and the eternal question, who stole the covers? Arguments are whispered, not so much to keep from waking others, but to maintain plausible deniability. Passive aggression is performed in shifting body weight and pointed size. There are no winners. Only survivors. The youngest children get stuffed into the middle, a spot that's both safe from drafts and guaranteed to make them regret all that fidgeting. Parents arrange themselves around the edges, ready to defend the border from blanket incursions. Siblings jostle for prime real estate, negotiating treaties that last until the first kick of the night. Occasionally, a cousin or family friend appears in the sleeping arrangement, either as a special guest or a punishment for some household infraction. If you've ever tried to sleep with a stranger's cold feet pressed against your shins, you have a sense of the chaos. Then there's the noise. Victorians snore with a vengeance, and the acoustics of a shared bed are such that every cough, sniffle and midnight sigh is amplified. Someone always talks in their sleep. Someone else always mutters dire threats about what will happen if they're woken up before dawn. The family dog is never far away, curling up at the foot of the bed or, on bolder nights, squeezing between the humans for a slice of the warmth. Comfort, in the traditional sense, is rare. Mattresses are lumpy and uneven, stuffed with straw, horsehair, or the sort of things that attract friendly colonies of bedbugs. You can never quite get comfortable, but you learn to sleep lightly, developing a sense of when the blanket is about to be stolen and when to brace for the inevitable cold draft that creeps in every hour. Sleep comes in fits and starts, interrupted by shuffling bodies, whispered complaints, and the constant low-grade wrestling match for a little more space. But there is a strange solidarity in the shared suffering. The warmth is real, even if it's unevenly distributed. The whispered conversations, the midnight giggles, and the odd sense of togetherness become their own comfort. In the worst of winter, nobody faces the cold alone, not even the guest who snores loudest. Morning arrives with a symphony of yawns, aching backs, and triumphant cries of, "I got the pillow all night!" The blanket is usually on the floor, someone's hair is tangled in someone else's button, and you emerge from the pile only slightly more rested than when you entered. Yet for all its discomfort, the shared Victorian bed is a nightly lesson in compromise, cooperation, and the power of collective warmth. If you want solitude and silence, try the garden shed, but you'll miss the best family stories and the rare feeling of beating the cold together. Keeping the fire burning through the night is a job for the unlucky or insomniac. You stumble out of bed to poke coals, trip over the dog, and realise you've let the room get cold enough for your breath to freeze. Job well done. The nightly vigil begins the moment the house goes dark and the last conversation has faded into a chorus of snores and the occasional complaint about cold feet. The fire is the silent family member, temperamental, vital, and not above punishing anyone who takes it for granted. In a world without electricity, a healthy fire is the difference between waking up refreshed and waking up encased in your own personal frost layer. The night watch is never glamorous. There's no uniform, no applause, and certainly no hot cup of coffee waiting for you. Instead, you're roused at some ungodly hour by the prickling certainty that the embers are dying, and if someone doesn't act soon, tomorrow's breakfast will be served in a kitchen best described as alpine. You fumble for your dressing gown, cursing whoever designed houses with stone floors and drafty corridors, and set off on your noble quest. You don't use a lantern, why waste oil? So your journey is lit by memory, moonlight, and the faint orange glow from what's left of the fire. Along the way, you collect hazards: a stray boot, a cat who objects to being stepped on, and, always, that cold patch of floor that makes your teeth ache just thinking about it. By the time you reach the hearth, you're awake enough to resent everyone still asleep. Tending the fire is part skill, part luck, and part unspoken ritual. You kneel down and inspect the situation. Are the coals still glowing, or is the fire just pretending to be alive out of spite? If there's hope, you prod the embers with a poker, add some kindling, and whisper encouraging words like, "Just one more hour, please." Sometimes the fire flares up in gratitude. Sometimes it pouts and refuses to cooperate, in which case you end up blowing on the coals until you're dizzy and reconsidering your life choices. Should you succeed in reviving the flames, there's a moment of triumph, a fleeting sense that you have, if only briefly, mastered the elements. If you fail, you go back to bed plotting elaborate revenge on whoever drew the night watch straw, or you try to wake a sibling and convince them it's their turn. Every family has its own firekeeping traditions. Some rotate shifts, some trust the eldest, or the lightest sleeper, or simply whoever is most likely to trip over the dog on the way back to bed. Children are sometimes pressed into service, a rite of passage that builds character and calluses. Grandparents, who claim to wake up naturally, are often found snoozing in a rocking chair, poker still in hand, dreaming of tropical climates. It's a communal operation. The morning stories always include a fire report. Who braved the cold, who let the room freeze, and who accidentally set their sleeve on fire. Again. If the fire has died, everyone blames the night watch. If the fire is roaring, no one says thank you, but at least the day starts above freezing. Keeping the fire alive is not just a chore, it's a nightly reminder of Victorian resilience, stubbornness, and the power of teamwork, even if half the team is asleep. In a world where warmth isn't guaranteed, the person who tends the fire is both hero and scapegoat, celebrated in silence and blamed out loud. So, if you ever wake up in a modern home, warm and comfortable, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to your Victorian ancestors, the bleary-eyed, slipper-wearing sentinels who kept the flame alive. And remember, somewhere in history, someone is poking the coals so you don't have to. If your vision survived childhood, it's about to meet its match. The daily news arrives in tiny print to be read aloud by someone with patience, a magnifying glass, and a surprising tolerance for nonsense. In the Victorian household, getting the news isn't as simple as scrolling on your phone before breakfast or flipping through television channels. It's a daily ritual and an obstacle course for the eyes, the nerves, and especially for poor Grandpa, who is somehow always nominated as the household's official reader. The day's paper arrives folded, smudged and already out of date, its pages stamped with headlines that might as well be printed in code. The font is minuscule, the ink half vanished, and every column is wedged so tightly together that just locating the beginning of a story is an act of faith. It begins with the gathering. The family clusters around the one decent lamp, everyone elbowing for the best patch of dim, flickering light. Grandpa takes his place, spectacles perched at the very tip of his nose, brow furrowed in concentration. Someone fetches the magnifying glass, the good one, not the one with a mysterious crack, and the show begins. Reading the Victorian newspaper is less about receiving information and more about deciphering a cryptic puzzle, while your audience gradually loses interest. Grandpa holds the page at arm's length, then up close, then sideways, seeking the precise angle where the letters blur into something approaching legibility. The print dances in and out of focus, the inkblots conspire against you, and no one is quite sure whether the headline reads coal shortage imminent or goat shortage imminent. In this house, both are equally alarming. As he reads aloud, every other word is a guess. Place names become unrecognisable, and international news morphs into tales of faraway lands like Indigo, India, or Arctic Russia, possibly just a very cold Tuesday. Grandpa's voice rises and falls with the shadows, occasionally punctuated by a deep sigh or an editorial comment, "Well, I never," or "What utter nonsense," which only adds to the confusion. Meanwhile, the rest of the family reacts in their own ways. Father grumbles about politics and mutters about how much better things were in his day, despite being barely older than the paper boy. Mother tries to keep everyone quiet, shushing children who are more interested in the advertisements for miracle cough syrups than the actual news. The younger siblings crowd close, eyes wide, waiting for the latest serial installment of the adventures of dashing Detective Drake. only to find Grandpa has skipped ahead to an alarming rise in local turnip prices. Inevitably, there's a debate over what was actually read. Was it a fire at the factory or a fine for the bakery? Did Lord Tiddleworth really elope with his housekeeper, or was that just the cat knocking over the lamp again? The family spends a good 10 minutes reconstructing the story, piecing together headlines and half-remembered paragraphs, until finally someone claims that's not what it said at all and demands a rereading. Grandpa obliges, this time with even more squinting, while the lamp gutter and the dog decides to chew on the crossword. By the end, no one is quite sure what's happened in the world outside, but everyone feels they've participated in something meaningful, if confusing. Eyes are rubbed, spectacles are polished, and the newspaper, now folded in new and improbable ways, is set aside until tomorrow's attempt. Modern readers, with your illuminated screens and adjustable fonts, spare a thought for your Victorian ancestors, for whom keeping up with the news was a nightly battle of eyesight, patience, and family negotiation. If the truth got lost somewhere in the gloom, well, at least you bonded over the effort. And if nothing else, you'll always remember the time you all mistook Queen Visit's Seaside for Queen Visit's Beehive, and no one thought to question it until next week's paper arrived. Drop your candle, knock over the lamp, or just forget where you set it down. Congratulations, the game of Find the Matches begins. The stakes, your dignity, your toes, and possibly the family cat's tail. Every Victorian night, there is a delicate choreography to keeping the household illuminated. Carry the candle, mind the drips, dodge the drafts, and always, always remember where you put it down. Yet inevitably, disaster strikes. It takes only a single moment of distraction. You set the candle on a shelf while looking for your stocking. The dog barks, a sibling calls your name, and blink. The room plunges into blackness. That's it. The great darkness has returned, and now every piece of furniture has become a predator lying in wait. Panic is immediate and universal. First comes the frantic pat-down of every nearby surface. Is the candle here? No. Is it here? Also no. Why are there so many unlit objects that feel exactly like candles but absolutely aren't? The family's patented candle search maneuver commences, arms outstretched, hands shuffling across the table, every step measured and hesitant like someone trying to cross a minefield in fuzzy slippers. You're not alone in your misery. If you drop the candle, everyone within earshot is suddenly involved in the search party. Mother sighs loudly. Siblings grumble, knock knees into tables, and unleash a chorus of "Ow! And who left this here?" Grandpa, convinced he can navigate by memory, manages to find every obstacle except the matches, and the family cat weaves through the chaos, delighted at the sudden rise in ankle-level activity. Of course, the stakes are high. In a world without light switches, losing the candle is a genuine crisis. The matches naturally are never where you left them. Sometimes they're in a drawer, sometimes in a pocket, sometimes in the bread box, because nothing keeps matches fresh like a loaf of rye. And even if you do find them, there's the added drama of actually striking one without setting fire to your sleeve, your dignity, or the wallpaper. Until the candle is found or relit, the entire house is at the mercy of the dark. Routine tasks become impossible quests. The act of walking to the next room feels like an expedition into a haunted forest. You shuffle, you trip, you stub your toe twice in the same place, and you begin to wonder if there is a malicious spirit whose only job is to scatter boots and chairs directly in your path. Someone inevitably discovers a long-lost toy or a family heirloom underfoot, adding to the confusion and the growing list of things to apologize for tomorrow. Meanwhile, conversation devolves into whispered accusations. Who put out the candle? Why are the matches in the pantry? Has anyone seen my sock? The tension mounts. Someone swears they can see better if they squint, while another insists that absolute darkness is actually good for the eyes. These arguments only end when a solution emerges, usually in the form of an ancient half-burned stump of a candle discovered by a heroic searcher in the bottom of the coal scuttle. At last, light returns. It's feeble, flickering, and accompanied by the scent of singed fingertips and collective relief. The faces of your family reappear, blinking and slightly cross, surrounded by the evidence of your search: overturned chairs, scattered shoes, a cat still gleefully pouncing on invisible toes. No one mentions the panic. Everyone pretends it didn't happen, but the lesson is clear. In the Victorian home, the candle is more than a source of light. It's a lifeline. Losing it, even for a moment, reminds everyone just how precarious comfort can be. So the next time you flip a switch and the room fills with light, spare a grateful thought for your ancestors. Part-time candle wranglers, full-time survivors, and perpetual players in the never-ending game of find the matches. Entertainment means whatever you can cobble together from scraps, hand-carved chess sets, repurposed dominoes, or playing cards so worn you're guessing at suits. Victory goes to whoever can see best or cheat most discreetly. In the Victorian household, long after the work is done and the dinner dishes are stacked by the pump, entertainment is a strictly low-budget, high-ingenuity affair. There's no television, no radio, and the piano in the parlour is missing 2 keys and the will to live. So the family circles up near the fire, the lone candle flickering bravely, and the ancient tradition of making your own fun begins. Board games, in this context, are rarely the glossy boxed sets you might recognise today. Instead, you're more likely to encounter a chessboard with half the pawns missing, their absence explained away by mysterious cat-related incidents. The remaining pieces are mismatched, half-painted, and one of the bishops is a button sewn onto a cork. No one remembers where the actual rules are, so the family's version of chess includes sudden death rounds and the occasional impromptu trade agreement. Checkers, or drafts if you're feeling fancy, are often improvised from slices of charcoal and the tops of old bottles. The board itself is usually a page torn from last year's almanac, the squares carefully drawn in with a pencil that's been sharpened down to a hopeful nub. If you're the family champion, you have memorised every dent in the board and used the candlelight's shadowy patterns to your advantage. If you're a less gifted player, you may resort to accidentally nudging the board whenever you're behind, a tradition that's earned many a sly wink and more than one heated whisper in the dark. Dominoes are made from discarded bones, sanded smooth and marked with ink that's faded to near invisibility. Matching up the pieces is as much a test of memory as eyesight. The winner is sometimes the last person awake, or just the person with the patience to count all the pips by firelight. Cards are a family favourite, if only because everyone agrees that no one actually knows what suit half the cards belong to anymore. The backs are soft with age, and the faces are so worn you'd need a detective and a bit of luck to distinguish the Queen of Hearts from the Three of Spades. There are house rules for every game, most of which change depending on who's shuffling. Sometimes the Joker is wild. Sometimes it's your cousin Henry, who's always trying to invent new rules that favour whoever has the most buttons in their pocket. If a game gets too heated, someone might suggest a round of charades, surely the most challenging Victorian pastime. With only shadows, mumbled clues, and the looming threat of knocking over the candle, it's less guess the phrase and more try not to set the sofa alight. Laughter is inevitable, but so is at least one minor accident involving a spilled drink and a hastily mopped-up rug. It's not always cutthroat. Sometimes the games are just an excuse to gather close and talk in low voices, sharing family stories, teasing each other, or simply revelling in the triumph of surviving another day. Cheating is expected, outrage is performative, and the final score rarely matters. The real win is the warmth, the flicker of light, and the feeling, however brief, that the world outside the window has faded away. As the candle burns low and the fire settles into embers, the games draw to a close. The winner may receive a proud handshake or an extra piece of burnt toast in the morning. The losers, meanwhile, will have all night to plot their revenge and maybe, just maybe, to craft a new game piece or two for next time. In the Victorian night, victory doesn't always go to the swift or the skilled. Sometimes it's just about keeping your eyes sharp, your wits sharper, and your fingers crossed that no one notices you're playing with a queen of something or other in every hand. When someone falls ill, the doctor arrives with a grim look and a lamp that makes everything spookier. Diagnosing by firelight is a lot like reading tea leaves, mostly hopeful guesses and a side of ominous muttering. Victorian medicine is not for the faint of heart or the weak of stomach. The first sign of trouble is usually the sound of coughing echoing down the draughty hallway, followed by mother's worried frown and father's declaration that it's probably nothing. But in a world with no central heating, plenty of damp corners, and a family policy of sharing every sniffle, probably nothing has a way of becoming definitely something overnight. As the patient is bundled in blankets and propped up near the fire, the rest of the household springs into anxious candle-lit action. Someone fetches a basin of water, someone else consults the family book of home remedies. For fever, apply a warm brick and hope for the best, and children are sternly warned not to breathe too close. The house itself conspires against you. Every shadow looms larger, every draught feels like a personal insult, and every groan from the patient is amplified by the silence of the night. When things take a turn for the worse, the doctor is sent for, a process that may involve sending the fastest child sprinting down dark streets, or, if luck allows, flagging down the doctor's carriage as it rattles past. The arrival of the doctor is an event in itself. He sweeps in, cloaked in the scent of wet wool and anxiety, carrying a battered leather bag and the sort of lamp that turns every face in the room a ghoulish yellow. His presence inspires both hope and fear. After all, this is a man who once diagnosed your neighbour's cow with general malaise and prescribed more hay. The examination is a ritual, performed in near darkness and total silence, save for the occasional wheeze from the patient and the low murmur of medical terms that may or may not be real. Let me see your tongue. Say, ah. Cough, but gently. Now, which side hurts more when I poke it? The lamp is held aloft, casting wild shadows that make every symptom look worse. Grandpa, watching from the corner, mutters that in his day, you just bit down on a stick and hoped for morning. Diagnosis, such as it is more art than science. The doctor squints, listens, prods, and finally delivers his verdict with all the gravity of a judge at sentencing. It's a touch of ague, or perhaps a chill of the humours. A little less draught, a little more broth, and we'll see how the night treats them. There's a prescription for rest, possibly a poultice, definitely a stern warning about the dangers of night air, and, if you're lucky, a small paper packet of mystery powder to stir into water. Side effects may include everything. If the illness lingers, the home is transformed into a makeshift infirmary. Candles burn low, soup simmers constantly, and everyone walks on tiptoe speaking in whispers. Neighbours stop by with advice, horror stories, and the occasional pie. The patient is visited by every member of the family and inevitably by the family cat, who is convinced that laps are healing. The uncertainty is the worst part. Is it a cold or something dire? Scarlet fever or just the damp talking? No one knows, and the doctor's advice to wait and see is both comfort and curse. At last the crisis passes. Either the patient recovers or everyone adjusts to a new, slightly noisier cough in the house. The doctor departs, lamp swinging, cloak billowing, and the family breathes a sigh of relief, and possibly coughs a bit more just to be sure. And so, in the flicker of firelight, you learn that in the Victorian era, getting sick is a group project, and diagnosing by candlelight is equal parts medicine, luck, and family legend. If you make it through the night, you're halfway to a cure, Without electric lights, you share the evening with all manner of critters who view darkness as an open invitation. There's a reason Victorian families kept cats. They're quieter than screaming about rats at midnight. When the sun dips below the rooftops and the last candle is snuffed out, your Victorian home transforms into a bustling underground metropolis, a city run by creatures with far too many legs and an unhealthy interest in your leftovers. You might think you run this house, but as dusk settles, the rats and roaches move in with all the confidence of entitled squatters. It starts with a telltale rustle from the pantry. Not the soft scurry of a timid mouse, but the bold scrabbling of a rat with places to be and bread to pilfer. You freeze mid-step, ears straining, as the sound is echoed by the patter of tiny feet along the baseboard. You want to ignore it, but the growing clatter makes it impossible. The darkness, thick and all-encompassing, only makes things worse. Every shadow looks suspicious. Every shape at the edge of your vision could be a whiskered intruder. You tiptoe around the room, hoping your slippers are the only things you step on. Victorian homes with their cracks and gaps are a paradise for pests. Rats have a sixth sense for a kitchen's weakest point, squeezing through holes that seem physically impossible, only to materialize under the table at the exact moment you drop a crumb. Roaches, meanwhile, take full advantage of the darkness, skittering across surfaces in search of anything remotely edible, or not. Some days, you swear they're just there for the company. Your weapons are limited. Traps and poison exist, but traps only catch the dumb ones and poison requires money and a certain amount of bravery to set it out in the first place. The family cat is your frontline defense, a furry, silent stalker who wages war on all things rodent. Cats are respected members of the household, not for their charm but for their utility. A cat curled by the hearth during the day is a relentless night shift assassin, always on patrol. If you're lucky, you might even find gifts at your feet come morning, a gesture of feline goodwill, or possibly just a statement about your sweeping skills. Still, not all pests are so easily discouraged. Cockroaches, for instance, are proof that even in the absence of modern fast food, nature finds a way. You spot one darting up the wall and try to squash it, only for it to vanish into a crack too small for even the bravest spoon. The next day, it'll be back, possibly with friends, to laugh at your efforts and nibble on the wallpaper paste. Family members become expert spotters and alarm raisers. "I saw something," is the nightly refrain, followed by a mad dash for the nearest shoe or broom. Grandmother swears by sprinkling flour in corners to spot rat footprints. It's science. While father insists on lighting extra candles as if roaches will respect a well-lit border, children become accidental accomplices, dropping crumbs and smuggling snacks under pillows, essentially running a bed and breakfast for the house's unwanted guests. There are tales, half true, half exaggerated, of legendary rats the size of small dogs, of beetles that survived the Great Flood, of a spider who once chased a guest out of the parlour. These stories are told with pride, exasperation, and a healthy dose of resignation. After all, if you can't beat the pests, you might as well make them part of the family folklore. And so, every evening, you tuck your feet up on the chair, pull the blankets a little tighter, and give the cat an extra scratch behind the ears. You fall asleep to the sounds of the tiny empire stirring below the floorboards, comforted only by the knowledge that tomorrow at least you'll have someone else to blame for missing bread and mysterious holes in the cheese. In the grand contest between Victorians and their pests, there are no winners, just survivors, human and otherwise, making peace with the darkness, the scratching, and the never-ending game of who moved my crumbs. Before sleep, every Victorian family performs a solemn ritual, checking locks, extinguishing lamps, hiding valuables, and trying not to fall over the chamber pot. Sweet dreams, if you can find your way to bed in the dark. As the last embers die in the hearth and the shadows grow thick, a hush falls over the house that's less peaceful than anxious. Bedtime in a Victorian home isn't a quick hop under the covers. It's an orchestrated production involving equal parts superstition, security, and slapstick. The evening's chaos, children squabbling, dogs barking, adults arguing about who left the door open, has faded into a kind of exhausted truce. Now begins the nightly routine that stands between your family and a visit from burglars, ghosts, or the neighbour's overly inquisitive goat. First, the doors. There are more of them than you'd expect, each with a lock that works most of the time. Father makes a show of turning every key and sliding every bolt, frowning meaningfully at any child who dares to suggest skipping a lock just for tonight. The windows are next. Single panes rattle in the wind, and wooden latches creak as they're wedged shut with scraps of cloth. It's not foolproof, but it's enough to keep out a chilly draught, or at least make it work a little harder. Lamps and candles are checked and snuffed one by one. This process is not without peril. A poorly placed elbow can send hot wax flying, and everyone remembers the year Aunt Martha's new curtains nearly became an impromptu bonfire. Children watch wide-eyed as the adults move methodically through the house, turning each flame into a smoky memory. The final lamp, always the one by the stairs, is extinguished last. For a moment there's perfect darkness, interrupted only by the sound of someone bumping into the hat rack and offering a creative whispered curse. Valuables are hidden with all the cunning of a family that has read far too many stories about highwaymen and mysterious midnight visitors. The silver spoon goes in the flour bin. The emergency shilling is tucked under the third stair. Important letters and treasured keepsakes are stuffed into coat pockets or wedged behind portrait frames, in places so secret that by morning half of them will be forgotten and lost to history. If there's a guest in the house, they're given a stern lecture about where to hide their watch, and a warning about the notorious phantom hand that's rumoured to lift baubles from beneath pillows. Now, the spiritual part of the ritual. Prayers are said, sometimes with devotion, sometimes in a rush. The family lines up for a quick recitation, for health, for protection, for warmth, and for forgiveness for whoever forgot to bring in the firewood. Children mumble through familiar words, sneaking glances at the dark corners of the room, just in case a wandering spirit is listening in. For good measure, a candle stub might be left burning under a picture of a saint, just to be safe and to keep away the mice. The last hurdle, navigating the pitch-black journey to bed. This is where true heroism is tested. You shuffle forward, arms outstretched, toes braced for disaster. Somewhere between the stairs and the bedroom, you encounter a minefield. Boots left out for cleaning, the family dog curled into an invisible ball, and, most treacherous of all, the chamber pot, lurking underfoot like a porcelain assassin. There are muffled yelps, apologies, and the occasional crash as someone discovers, too late, that the rug is folded in half. Finally, you crawl into bed, triumphant and mostly intact. The blankets are cold, the mattress lumpy, but the sense of relief is real. You listen to the house settling, to the wind rattling the shutters, and to the faint prayers still lingering in the air. The last thought before sleep is always the same. You've survived another day, and if you're lucky, you'll make it to morning with your valuables, your dignity, and at least one unbruised toe. Sweet dreams, Victorian style, earned, not given. Thunder shakes the windows, the wind howls, and every room suddenly feels like a haunted cave. The family gathers, clutches each other, and prays the roof is still attached by morning. Victorian nights are powerless by default, but a proper storm transforms the ordinary darkness into something bordering on epic drama. It begins with a distant rumble, a warning shot from the sky, then builds into a symphony of rattling shutters, groaning rafters, and the eerie whistle of wind squeezing through every crack in the wall. There's nothing like a tempest to remind you that your home is mostly wood, hope, and stubbornness. As rain pelts the glass and gusts test the loyalty of every loose tile, the entire household huddles together in the sturdiest room, usually the kitchen, which at least has a table to duck under if things get truly exciting. Mother distributes blankets and attempts to appear calm, although her eyes keep darting to the ceiling counting leaks. Father, with the authority of someone who has read 3 weather proverbs and survived at least 1 chimney collapse, proclaims that this is nothing, just a typical squall. Meanwhile, the dog has already claimed the drier spot and the cat has vanished, possibly to another dimension. With lightning comes the thrill of improvised lighting. Candles and lamps are summoned from every corner, flames flickering in rhythm with the thunder. The family discovers yet again that the best way to make a room feel enormous is to see it briefly illuminated by a lightning flash, revealing the collective clutter, the leaning stacks of newspapers, and that one window that never quite closes. Shadows dance wildly on the walls, turning every coat rack into a lurking figure and every teapot into an artifact of unspeakable power. Storm nights are made for storytelling, and soon someone launches into a tale of local legend. A ghost ship spotted on the river during a storm, or the time Uncle Cedric claimed he saw St. Elmo's fire on the garden fence. Children, wide-eyed, cling to each other and to the belief that as long as everyone stays close, nothing supernatural will dare approach. The adults exchange knowing glances, remembering their own childhood storms, the comfort of familiar arms, and the shared hope that the roof really does hold this time. Of course, with storms come leaks. Buckets and pots are drafted into service, strategically placed to catch the steady drip, drip, drip from above. There is always a rush to move chairs and rugs out of harm's way, usually resulting in at least one stubbed toe and several shouted directions. The family's system for handling leaks is equal parts military precision and complete chaos, depending on who is in charge and whether the drip has started making a plink noise that will haunt your dreams. Sleep is nearly impossible. Every clap of thunder sends a new ripple of anxiety through the room, and the wind seems determined to find that one loose shutter and slap it repeatedly, just for the fun of it. Some brave soul is dispatched to check the windows, only to return drenched, shivering, and declaring that the storm is definitely getting worse. The rest of the family simply pulls the blankets tighter and shares nervous laughter, trying to drown out the storm with conversation, songs, or whatever snacks haven't gone soggy in the damp. When dawn finally breaks, the storm has usually passed, or at least taken a nap. The family emerges bleary-eyed to survey the damage. A puddle in the pantry, a suspicious patch of ceiling, and if they're lucky, all the livestock still present and accounted for. There is relief in survival, and a strange pride in having weathered yet another night that tried very hard to unhouse them. In the end, every powerless stormy night is a test of walls, of willpower, and of the collective belief that as long as they stick together, the worst the world can throw at them will be met with stubbornness, blankets, and a well-timed ghost story. And as the morning light creeps in, the family agrees, for the 100th time, that nothing brings people closer than thunder, leaky ceilings, and the blessed, blessed arrival of a new day. When your hearth goes cold, there's only one thing to do. Knock on the neighbour's door and beg a hot coal. It's humbling, awkward, and a guaranteed way to find out who likes you. In a Victorian home, letting the fire die out is a cardinal sin, a mark of shame, and an inconvenience rivalled only by running out of tea leaves. Yet, no matter how diligent the family night watch, sooner or later disaster strikes. A drowsy poke at the coals, a gust of wind down the chimney, or the simple mathematics of not enough wood and too much ambition. You wake to a hearth as cold and empty as your hopes for an uneventful morning, and the air bites your nose in a way that only Victorian air can. There's no magical electric starter, no push to ignite. You need fire, and you need it fast. The protocol is both ancient and universally awkward. The long, cold walk to the neighbour's house, clutching a pot or a tin carefully lined with ashes. Every step is a study in humility. You try to appear casual, as though you're just out for a friendly stroll at sunrise, but your neighbours know. Everyone in the village knows what it means to see a person with an empty pot at their door. It's the walk of shame, Victorian edition. You knock, hoping it's not too early and that you're not interrupting anyone's breakfast or worse family drama. The door creaks open and you attempt your best apologetic smile. Good morning. Terribly sorry to trouble you, but could I possibly... Well, you see, the fire's gone cold. You trail off, holding out your pot like an offering. It's a humbling moment, one that reduces even the proudest to the same level as a child asking for more porridge. Your neighbour, if they are kind, and most are, at least on the surface, makes a show of commiseration. Oh, it happens to the best of us, they say, though their eyes may betray a flicker of satisfaction. After all, last winter you were the one to supply their missing coal during a blizzard, and neighbourly credit is a complex shifting balance. Sometimes they'll regale you with tales of the time their own fire went out 3 times in a week, all while expertly fishing a glowing ember from their hearth and depositing it in your pot. The exchange is quick but loaded with unspoken rules. Too little ash and your ember may die on the walk home. Too much and you risk snuffing the coal. You offer thanks, sincere, profuse, perhaps even a bit desperate. Promises to return the favour are made, and sometimes a token gift of bread or a scrap of cheese is offered in gratitude. This is community, Victorian style, grudging, practical, and forged in the fires of mutual inconvenience. The return journey is a slow one, every gust of wind a potential disaster. You cradle your prize like a newborn, shielding it with your body, eyes fixed on the faint curl of smoke that means all is not yet lost. The family watches anxiously from the window as you approach, and as you cross the threshold, the triumphant announcement, "I've got it," is met with genuine relief. There's an art to coaxing a new fire from borrowed embers. You lay a kindling, blow gently, and whisper the sorts of promises usually reserved for saints and especially stubborn pets. If luck is with you, flames leap up, warmth returns, and the house slowly shakes off the morning chill. If not, well, you're off to visit the other neighbour, hoping you haven't exhausted the local supply of goodwill. The ordeal ends not just with the rekindling of flames, but with a new story for the family archive, one that will be told with embarrassment and laughter for years to come. Borrowing fire in all its humble glory is a reminder that, even in a world of closed doors and private hearths, survival often means reaching out, asking for help, and accepting it with grace and a little bit of humility. Privacy. That's for the upper class. Bath night is a group affair with everyone taking turns in the same water until it's more broth than bath. If you're last, you get bonus flavour. Bath night in the Victorian home is less a cleansing ritual and more a logistical marathon. It's a spectacle, a comedy, and a lesson in humility, sometimes all at once. The process begins hours before the first toe touches water. Water must be fetched and boiled, kettle by kettle, each one added to the battered tin tub with a splash and a sigh. If it's winter, your reward is a steamy kitchen and the sensation of boiling your toes while the rest of your body shivers. If it's summer, you simply sweat alongside the soup. The tub itself is a survivor of many battles, dented from years of use, permanently streaked with mysterious stains, and occasionally doubling as a washtub or a vessel for brewing questionable stews. When it finally emerges from its corner, there's a collective groan. Everyone knows what's coming. The eldest, or whoever is smallest and fastest, gets the first dip, soaking in what passes for clean water. For a few blissful minutes they are royalty, swirling the water, enjoying the only truly hot soak of the evening, and pretending not to notice everyone else watching, waiting for their turn. Then, one by one, the rest of the family lines up. The youngest usually goes next, followed by siblings in descending order of how many chores they did that week, and finally, the adults resigned to their fate. By the time it's your turn, the water has transformed from a crystal pool to something that might technically be called family broth. There are floating islands of lint, mysterious bits of hay, and a distinct cloudiness that comes from sheer optimism and the inevitable laws of physics. Privacy is a far-off dream. Siblings dash through the kitchen, adults scold, the dog lurks, and at least one curious neighbour seems to appear just in time to borrow a cup of sugar. The concept of shutting a door is laughable. Half the time, the kitchen doesn't even have one. Modesty is sacrificed in the name of efficiency. Towels are thin, cold, and slightly damp from last week's bath night. If you want a truly private wash, you'll have to settle for a quick scrub behind a curtain of steam, and the hope that no one is paying attention. Soap is shared, rationed, and occasionally lost to the depths. The lye burns, the scent is rustic, and anyone who drops the soap is subject to family ridicule for a solid week. Hair washing is an ordeal in itself, accomplished with water poured over the head from a jug and much gasping. If you manage to rinse all the soap out, you're a legend. Being last in line is a unique brand of suffering. The water is lukewarm at best, the soap has dissolved into nothingness, and the tub bottom is now as treacherous as a frozen pond. You step in gingerly, hoping not to disturb the sediment, and do your best to emerge cleaner than you started, or, at the very least, no dirtier. Afterwards, there's the ordeal of drying off and the equally heroic act of emptying the tub. Water is lugged back outside, sloshing down steps, leaving a trail of suds and the distinct aroma of well-intentioned hygiene. Clothes are pulled on in haste, hair is combed if there's time, and everyone tries to forget what just happened until next week. Bath night ends with a chorus of shivers, laughter, and the universal agreement that, while dignity may be a casualty, family unity and resilience win out. And if you are ever tempted to complain about your modern shower, just remember, somewhere in history, an entire family is still waiting for their turn in the tub. As you lie in the dark, shivering under a mountain of blankets, you imagine a world where light comes from the walls and warmth doesn't require constant vigilance. Someday, someone will invent a way out of this, but tonight, you just hope the candle lasts till morning. Victorian nights are a masterclass in endurance and creative wishful thinking. As the final candle flickers on the bedside table, you snuggle deeper under scratchy covers, the chill of the room determined to sneak in at every gap. You've survived the rituals, the wrestling match for a patch of blanket, the orchestral snores from every direction, the last-minute stampede to check that the fire is at least pretending to behave. The darkness settles like another heavy quilt, equal parts comfort and curse. In that inky silence, your mind wanders, past the aches in your joints and the scent of soap still clinging from bath night. What if things could be different? What if, with a flick of the wrist, you could banish shadows not just from the kitchen, but from every hidden corner? You let your imagination drift to the wildest stories you've overheard. Travellers from London claiming to have seen lights that need no flame, glowing steadily from bulbs on the ceiling, untouched by wind or wax or the threat of burning down the curtains. Light you could trust, light that didn't flicker out just as you hit the most suspenseful part of a ghost story. You picture a world where winter is tamed, where warmth pours from invisible sources, and nobody has to sleep with a hot brick clutched to their stomach. In this fantasy future, socks dry in minutes, tea never goes cold, and nobody wakes at midnight to prod reluctant embers. Houses are silent but cosy. their walls humming with a magic called electricity, a word you've only ever heard in lectures, spoken with awe and a touch of suspicion. What would it be like, you wonder, to walk from room to room with every corner bright and every surface warm, with not a candle stub or box of matches in sight? Your reverie is interrupted by the sound of a sibling grumbling about the cold and an elbow making a direct assault on your ribs, the candle gutters. You hope it will last. There's something deeply unnerving about complete darkness, about the way shadows seem to press in, alive with the memories of every ghost story you've ever been told. Still, your mind drifts back to the dream. You picture a parade of inventors, wild-haired, ink-stained, pacing late into the night by gaslight, all on the verge of figuring out how to trap lightning in a glass bulb. You imagine newspapers one day trumpeting the news, Edison's light, nighttime defeated, families rejoice. The world would surely never be the same. Yet, for all your longing, there's something oddly reassuring about the familiar hardships, the rituals, the group struggles, the shared jokes about how the dog is probably the warmest creature in the bed. Maybe the future will be bright and easy, but will it feel the same? Will families still crowd together in a pool of candlelight, swapping stories and sharing warmth, the darkness outside making every word more important? Will children complain about baths and blankets if they've never known what it's like to sleep in their boots just to keep warm? Eventually your eyelids grow heavy. The candle throws one last defiant glow, then gives up, leaving the room blanketed in pure, perfect night. Your last thoughts are half hope, half memory, that maybe one day people will remember what it was like to dream of the future in the dark and be just a little bit grateful for every small light that comes their way. For now, you burrow deeper, hug the warmth you have and drift off, dreaming of light bulbs, of magic glowing walls, and a world where no one ever has to curse a candle again. You thought your home was Victorian chic, but every surface has its own charcoal patina courtesy of open fires and kerosene lamps. You wipe the mantle, it's instantly grey again. Your curtains, once white, now match your mood. Soot, the era's most persistent home decor trend, and you're living in it. There's a certain romance in imagining a Victorian household, all gleaming brass, flickering firelight, and faintly mysterious corners. Reality, though, is more cough-inducing smog than Pinterest mood board. Open fires are beautiful in theory, but in practice they're soot factories with a talent for finding the single clean spot left on your nice tablecloth. Every time you light a lamp or coax the embers into life, you're signing up for another layer of interior sadness. Morning begins with a hopeful swipe at the windowsill just to see if you can spot the street outside. You can't. The glass is streaked with soot, finger marks, and last night's attempt at catching a spider, which means another day of squinting at the weather and pretending you know if it's raining or just dark. You sigh, dampen a rag, and start wiping. 2 minutes later, the rag is black, your hands are grey, and the windowsill looks pretty much the same. Every surface tells the same story. The mantelpiece, polished lovingly last week, is now dusted in a fine coat of black. The walls above the fireplace carry a shadowy mural, painted by countless years of smoky evenings and the occasional overzealous coal toss. Even the plates stacked safely in the cabinet feel gritty to the touch. Bread comes out of the oven with a crust that's 1/3 actual food, 2/3 edible carbon. At this point, you're convinced the family's just ingesting soot in small daily doses, and perhaps you're building up some kind of superpower or a lifetime cough. Textiles suffer most. The curtains, once cheery and white, have adopted a shade best described as London fog meets Monday morning. Your favourite shawl is lined with flecks of ash, and even the dog's blanket, laundered just yesterday, now sports an abstract pattern that would impress the Royal Academy if only anyone could stop sneezing long enough to appreciate it. You hang sheets out to dry, and the wind rewards you with a fresh coating of chimney discharge for your trouble. cleaning is less a task and more a form of performance art. The feather duster leaves elegant black stripes across every surface. Scrubbing the floor becomes a test of optimism. No sooner have you washed away a muddy footprint than a new, soot-blackened one appears, usually courtesy of a family member who just popped in to check on the fire. There are special cloths, secret concoctions of vinegar and elbow grease, and yet the soot always returns, as reliable as the evening bell. And let's not forget the smell. The entire house is wrapped in a faint haze of burnt things, a perfume that lingers in clothes, in hair, and in the bread bin. Visitors walk in and immediately remark, "Smells cosy in here," which is Victorian for, "Are you burning tyres for warmth?" You take pride in your home, of course, but you learn to lower expectations and embrace the rustic charm of constantly dirty hands and perpetually dingy lace. Occasionally you dream of the future, of electric light, smokeless rooms, and walls the colour of something other than existential despair. But for now, you make peace with the patina of history, the daily dance of cleaning and resooting, the ritual of pretending you care when you know you'll be back at it again tomorrow. Because in the Victorian era, soot isn't just a nuisance. It's a way of life, a badge of survival, and the reason you never wear white indoors. You dust, you cough, you laugh, and you tell yourself, someday, when the future finally arrives, you'll still be able to spot a real Victorian by the colour of their curtains and the resilience in their sigh. Every flicker of flame is a financial decision. Need to pee at night? That'll cost you a penny in tallow. Want to read? Better hope you're not burning next week's butter. In Victorian times, you ration light like it's gold, and every family argument ends with someone blaming you for wasting the good candles on chess. Nothing in a Victorian household is more precious or more jealously guarded than the candle stash. Candles are not merely a means of keeping the darkness at bay. They are the currency of comfort, a visible measure of prudence and thrift. Every evening is a careful calculation. Which rooms must remain dark? Who gets the privilege of a flickering flame? And most importantly, will there be enough left for Sunday's roast or another late-night emergency game of cards? Lighting a candle is an act of deliberation, attended by sighs, whispered consultations, and often regret. Children beg for one so they can read or finish homework. Parents counter with tales of making do by moonlight and the fine tradition of memorizing lessons by starlight. Anyone caught using a full tallow candle for mere convenience, say, illuminating the corridor so the dog doesn't trip you, will be greeted with gasps and a running tally of how much that single flame is costing the family. It's not just light, it's lost pudding, gone butter, vanished savings. This stinginess is not just custom, it's necessity. Candles are costly, especially the fine ones made of beeswax, reserved for holidays, honoured guests, and the annual dusting of the parlour. The everyday sort, made of tallow, have all the subtlety of burning mutton fat and the staying power of a child's promise. Every penny spent on light is a penny not spent on tea, jam, or coal. The household budget is an intricate web, and candles are always at its glowing centre. Deciding when and where to light up is the stuff of family council. The kitchen, heart of the home, might merit 2 candles, one for the table, one for the stove, if there's bread to slice or soup to stir. The sitting room gets one, unless someone important is visiting, in which case you might risk a second, only to have Mother hover nervously and remind everyone to use their eyes and not their mouths when they speak. The hallways, bedrooms, and that odd little closet nobody likes to mention. Darkness will do just fine. Arguments are routine. Who left the candle burning in the privy? Father bellows, clutching the monthly accounts. That was a penny's worth gone up in smoke. Siblings bicker over who snuffed out the best candle and who left a perfectly good stub to melt into a useless puddle. Grandmother, always keen to keep the family in line, sits by the hearth, darning socks by the faintest light possible, using eyesight honed by decades of thrift and disappointment. Entertaining is an exercise in controlled illumination. Too much light, and the neighbours will talk. Have you come into money then? Too little, and your guests will mutter about parsimonious hospitality and stumble over the dog. The clever host learns the art of candle shadow, just enough glow to seem inviting, not enough to betray the state of the wallpaper. Children devise candle-saving games, holding contests to see who can move from room to room in utter darkness, or who can recite an entire poem without peeking at their page. The family's greatest treasures are stubs and remnants, carefully saved in a box for emergencies, melted down and reformed into lumpy, earnest new candles that never burn quite right, but are loved all the same. As night deepens and the last candle is extinguished with reverence, you huddle under blankets, content in the knowledge that you've squeezed one more day out of the household candle fund. Tomorrow, you'll squint at your chores and step on the cat, but you'll do it in the noble tradition of generations who understood that a little darkness never hurt anyone, and that in the end the glow of prudence lasts longer than any flame. Knocking after sunset means someone's either in trouble or just inconsiderate. You scramble to light lamps, straighten your hair, and find a spare blanket, all while Aunt Agnes and her mystery parcel settle in for a week. Hospitality, Victorian style. Always slightly resentful, always in the dark. Evening is supposed to be the time when the family can finally let down its collective guard, when hair comes loose, shoes come off, and the last candle is watched with the same anxiety as a gold bar in a room full of pickpockets. But then comes a knock at the door. It's not just any knock either. It's the determined rapping of someone who is absolutely not turning back, no matter how long it takes for you to shuffle to the door, lamp in hand, heart in mouth. Someone, usually the child with the best night vision, is dispatched to answer. You hold your breath as the door swings open to reveal, inevitably, Aunt Agnes. A vision in travelling cloak, bristling with parcels, baskets, and, inexplicably, a live chicken. Her greeting is breezy. I hope I'm not disturbing anything. And immediately followed by a wave of perfumes, mothballs, and the distinct scent of untold stories. Within moments, she swept into the parlour, trailing belongings and confusion in her wake. Chaos ensues. The lamps must be lit, with precious candles no less, chairs fetched, and hair hastily patted down in an attempt to look presentable. Children are scrubbed on the spot with a damp cloth, and grandfather is woken up from his strategic nap by the fire and pressed into service carrying in parcels that seem to multiply every time you look away. The guest bed, if you even have such a thing, is dug out from under a pile of boots and school books. If not, the least lumpy sofa is offered, along with a warning that the dog sometimes claims it after midnight. Aunt Agnes, of course, is just getting started. She unpacks her luggage as if she's moving in for the season. Out come shawls, handkerchiefs, jars of dubious preserves, and a suspiciously lively hat box. Every parcel has a story. This one is for a friend in the next village, this one is medicine for my digestion, and this small mysterious bundle is not to be opened except in case of an emergency. You don't ask what counts as an emergency. You're not sure you want to know. Hospitality is extended with a kind of grim determination. Tea is brewed from the good leaves. The last of the sugar is sacrificed. Mother produces the special biscuits, slightly stale but ceremonially important. Conversation is bright but forced, everyone simultaneously trying to make Aunt Agnes feel welcome and silently calculating how long before she asks for the best pillow. As night falls, the house rearranges itself around the visitor. Children are shuffled to new beds, blankets are redistributed with whispered threats, and the family cat takes one look at the new sleeping arrangements and decides to spend the night with the neighbours. The guest is escorted to her quarters, curtains drawn, lamp dimmed, luggage piled up like a miniature barricade. Aunt Agnes proclaims the situation very cosy and promptly produces an eye mask, 2 knitted shawls, and a jar of something herbal for the night air. The next morning, Aunt Agnes will rise before dawn, already bustling about, offering advice, borrowing the kitchen, and unpacking more parcels. She'll settle in for a week, or however long it takes her to complete her mysterious errands. The house will adapt as it always does to her presence, a little more crowded, a little more chaotic, and against everyone's best efforts, a little more lively. Because in the Victorian night, hospitality isn't just a virtue, it's a survival skill. And though you may sigh at the disruption, roll your eyes at the luggage and whisper complaints under your breath, you'll look back and remember the warmth of an unexpected guest, even if you're still finding her handkerchiefs tucked into odd places 6 months later. Evenings turn parenting into a contact sport. Without light, children become stealth ninjas, hiding under tables, inside cupboards, and occasionally in the coal bin. The phrase "put the kids to bed" actually means hunt them down and hope you're not tucking in the neighbour's child by accident. When the last rays of sunlight slip from the Victorian windows, a peculiar transformation takes place. The children, who all afternoon were easy to track by the trail of muddy boots and the volume of their shrieking, vanish into the twilight, morphing from small, noisy humans into shadowy sprites with the evasiveness of well-trained spies. Every nook and cranny becomes a hiding spot, every shadow a potential den of giggling mischief. The lack of electric light is both blessing and curse. On the one hand, you can't see what new disaster has been wrought on the parlour rug. On the other, you also can't see who, or what, you're about to step on as you navigate the house with a single candle and the desperate hope you're not about to trip over the dog. Siblings conspire, creating alliances and rivalries in the dark. The game is simple. Stay invisible for as long as possible, make as much noise as possible when finally discovered, and then attempt to negotiate for extra bedtime stories using whatever leverage is at hand, mostly their own refusal to budge. "Where's Tommy?" someone asks. There's silence. This is never a good sign. The adults begin the nightly ritual, part roll call, part search party, fanning out across the house with lamp and lantern, poking into wardrobes, feeling under beds, and gingerly opening the coal bin just in case. Shoes are checked for feet. Cupboards are opened to reveal not only children, but also a small collection of pilfered biscuits, and, once, a very confused kitten. You learn quickly that if a room seems empty, it almost certainly isn't. Occasionally the search uncovers more children than you started with. Neighbours, equally overwhelmed by the chaos, sometimes accidentally send their offspring to your house for the evening. The confusion is compounded by identical nightshirts, wild hair, and the simple fact that in Victorian light, every child looks equally guilty. The line between family and friend blurs, and nobody is quite sure who belongs to whom until morning. Bedtime itself is an exercise in compromise and low-grade bribery. There are arguments over who gets the coveted spot furthest from the window, less draft, fewer ghost stories, who gets the extra blanket, and whether or not it's fair to make the smallest child sleep in the middle for warmth. Parents negotiate, plead, and, when all else fails, threaten to read aloud from the family's most boring moral tale until everyone surrenders. As the children are wrangled, washed, and steered towards beds of various shapes and comfort levels, the chaos slowly ebbs into a symphony of yawns, murmured protests, and the thud of a pillow launched across the room. Lullabies are sung, prayers are recited, and promises are made. I won't hide in the pantry tomorrow, really. That no one truly expects to be kept. The youngest clutch favourite rags or stuffed toys, seeking comfort in the familiar scent of home and soot. Eventually peace descends. The house grows quiet except for the soft shuffling of feet and the occasional creak as someone checks for stragglers or retrieves a last-minute glass of water. The final head count is always approximate. The certainty that everyone is accounted for relies mostly on instinct, and the knowledge that, one way or another, the children will all reappear for breakfast. Victorian childcare after sunset isn't about perfection. It's about perseverance, improvisation, and embracing the fact that in a house lit by candles and chaos, sometimes the best you can do is round up most of the kids, tuck them in, and trust that the right ones will be there in the morning. If you do find an extra child, well, there's always room for one more at the table. So tonight, as the last candle burns low and the shadows finally stop rearranging the furniture, you can let yourself drift away knowing you survived the day. You woke with the sun because it decided so. You navigated your house by memory and bruises. You ate meals cooked in half-light, bathed in water that actively resented you, and shared warmth with family, pets, and at least one object you couldn't identify in the dark. And somehow, that was normal. Victorian families lived this way every single day, not as a novelty, not as a cozy aesthetic, but as a constant exercise in patience, resilience, and not accidentally setting the house on fire. They learned to stretch daylight, ration candlelight, and turn routine discomfort into a skill. Darkness wasn't something to fear. It was something to manage, negotiate with, and eventually accept. They found ways to laugh in the gloom, to tell stories by firelight, to gather close when the world outside went quiet and cold. They raised children, cared for the sick, mourned their dead, and still showed up the next morning to do it all again. No switches, no hum of electricity, just stubborn determination and a surprising amount of soot. So as you lie there now, wrapped in clean blankets, with light at the tap of a finger and warmth that doesn't require constant supervision, maybe offer a quiet nod to the people who lived before all of that. The families who survived flickering lamps, freezing floors, and nights so dark they had to be felt instead of seen. Because history isn't just wars and dates, it's ordinary people doing extraordinary things just to get through the day, and then the night. So rest easy, enjoy the glow, and be thankful you don't have to check the fire one last time before falling asleep.